Welcome back to Cedar Cove Farm. It's a balmy, overcast day here on the farm, but work needs to be done. So I am going out to watch Tucker chase the chickens in the corner. But today's task, I'm gonna go hook up the planter and we're gonna start going through it, figuring out what needs to be done, what parts need replaced, what needs greased, what needs fixed up, and try and figure some of that out. So this will probably be a multi-part series. I don't know how much it's going to take, how much work it's going to be, but I'm going to bring you guys along. I haven't gone through the planter at all yet. It's been sitting since we parked it after I got it, and I'm going to go hook it up and bring it over towards the shop so tools are closer, and let's see what all needs fixed. All right, so first thing, hook up the planter. There's no jack on the planter, so I went, got my floor jack. We're going to get it jacked up so it's the height of the drawbar. So first item on the list to buy is a jack. Next thing I need to do, my drawbar is currently all the way in. To have more turning clearance, I'm going to pull that out, move that quick. All right, now we're high enough. I'm gonna back the tractor up and get her hooked up. Tractor's hooked up. I'm going to take it over to the shop. I'm going to take the jack, load it on my fork so I don't have to carry that. I'll see you guys over there. Got the planter unhooked. Time to go through in a little more detail. I'll show you some of the things that I know I'll need to fix or change, and we'll start looking into other stuff. First thing, get a jack. Number two, this is known as the SCV tip. SCV stands for selective control valve. What that does is that is a hydraulic line that will plug in back here on the tractor, and then inside the tractor, that's what I'll use there's a lever to raise and lower the machine that'll send hydraulic flow out or allow it back. This tip is an older style tip for older tractors. There wasn't a standard back in the day. There is now, but each manufacturer had their own tips. That's not a John Deere tip, so I'll need to take that off, swap that out. Luckily, everything's a standard today. This tractor is new enough that it has a standardized tip, so I can just take this down to the local tractor store that's a quarter mile down the road, and they can swap out the tip for me. Next thing, this hydraulic pump, I'm gonna have to mount it up and see how I can brace it to get it to mount onto the tractor. It's just gonna be a matter of trial and error to get it on there, but we'll get it up there. Going around the machine, one thing to look at if you get any machines, buy any kind of farming equipment, hydraulic lines, they dry rot over time. So this line looks like it could potentially be loose. There's no obvious cracks in it, but be careful. Tractor hydraulics run 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 PSI on new tractors. So look over these lines, look for holes. Don't ever check for a hole with your hand. That's a high enough pressure. If there's a pinhole, it will break through the skin and inject you with hydraulic fluid, and you will get an infection, potentially lose limbs, could be worse. So look those over. The first time you're actually running the hydraulics on a system, stay away. If a line bursts, you don't want to be near it, right? Looking over here, there's a little nick in that line. I can see metal braiding here. So this line is probably a line I'm going to swap out. I don't want that to burst on me. I don't want to risk it. So it's better to just get rid of it, get a new one. Safety is paramount. Moving back on the planter. So a little bit of a description here on how these planters work. It's similar to the 2-row, but a little different. Here, if you look, there's 2 discs that will open what's called the furrow, or the ground where you're putting the seed in. What you have on these is a gauge wheel. This actually sets the depth. So there's an adjustment up here. You can see all the different holes. So as this would be lowered down, these come up, and that lowers, that sets your depth on the ground, so how deep you're going to go. So I'll have to figure that out in the field. But the gauge wheels, you want to look for, do they spin? This one's got a cut in it. If I were productive farming, I would replace that. For the little bit of sweet corn I do, that's not going to be a problem. After the seed is in the ground, we'll move back here. We have what's called the closing wheels. So these 2 wheels run at the very end. They come together and they will push the ground back together and close the furrow. So the blades open it, gauge wheels set your depth, closing wheels close the furrow. So what I'm going to go through now, spin every gauge wheel, spin every closing wheel, spin the discs, see and make sure that everything spins. If it's not spinning, it needs replaced or it needs greased. We'll try grease first. More than likely, if it's not spinning, grease isn't going to help it. The bearing's probably seized. The other thing I'm going to do, grab the grease gun. There's grease points here. I'm not seeing grease points on any other parts, but we'll at least get grease, or at least try to put grease into these fittings. A lot of these older machines that haven't been used for a while, you can see it's pretty rusty. It's probably not going to accept grease. This is a little standard fitting. They make all kinds of sizes. I've got a box of them, so I'll probably end up replacing quite a few of these. But that'll be the next step, is to go through, make sure everything spins, looks good enough to put in a 1/4 acre, 1/2 acre of sweet corn. Moving around the machine, now that I've looked back at the openers, I'm going to get up to the tank. So up here on top, so you can see that yellow rod. That was a old school bin level indicator. If you had seed on here, that flag would be pushed up. As it got to the bottom, you would know you're empty. Looking in the tank, there's lots of mouse poop, but the tank looks solid, which is good. No obvious leaks or cracks. Looking at the lid, this rubber seal looks good. What that means, this tank actually holds pressure because of the fan when it's in use. So no, sorry, the lighting is terrible. No cracks means it'll hold pressure, which means another thing that maybe it'll work. Stepping back, this is the fan. Again, we've got hydraulic lines back here. That's the actual fan motor back there. This is the fan with hydraulic cooler. Based on there being hose clamps, that means this is a low pressure system, which is good. It makes it easier to run. High pressure, you would have solid fittings. So low pressure system, a little safer, still dangerous. If there's leaks or spring, you pop a hose brake, but that's good. So everything up top here looks pretty good. I'm going to jump back down and start making my list and start going through stuff. I've moved to the back of the machine to give you a little more in-depth view of how it actually works. So you'll remember there was a big silver bowl mounted right there, so I pulled that off. So you can see inside the bowl, it's just a big bowl with dimples. So the seed will actually go into these dimples. I gotta clean it out. Looks like the mice lived there for a while. But what happens is, the tank's in front of me here. So this outlet is from the tank. Seed will come into that bowl. The fan will be spinning, creating air pressure, trying to blow seed out against the edges of that bowl where they'll get caught in the dimples. The bowl will then rotate this way. As it comes up, it will go in to these tubes. Each one of these tubes has a hose that the fan is blowing air through, blowing out to each opener. This wheel is actually on the outside of the bowl, helping push those seeds down, and then this brush will keep extras from coming up and over and keep it down in the bottom. So that's actually how this machine will work. Fan pressure blows the seed against the bowl. The ground drive, there's a chain. This chain will connect to the wheel, which will spin a gearbox, which spins this, which will in turn spin that bowl, allowing the bowl to spin around. And then as the bowl spins, seed will come up, drop down into those white tubes, and be blown out into the openers. Pretty simple system. There's still systems in the market today that use similar styles of seed delivery. Having gone through the row units, the next step is to see how the hydraulic pump is going to mate up to the tractor. So I brought the tractor back up. That's my hydraulic pump. It's going to go on the PTO shaft. So older tractors didn't have the hydraulics to run the fan that this planter uses. My tractor actually doesn't have a hydraulic port that would run this fan. So what they did back then is they just ran a hydraulic pump off the PTO. All right, the pump is on. Now, I was worried about how was I gonna brace this thing, but it doesn't really have much room to move in here, and it's always going to be spinning at the same direction at the same speed. So once it's against the brace, it should hold itself. So the next step is to turn the PTO on slowly, low RPMs, and see what happens, if it pumps, if there's leaks. So I think that's the next step here. Whenever you're working with hydraulics, safety glasses. There's oil, we're good there. I'm going to turn it back on and actually rev the tractor up a bit, see if we can build a little more pressure and see if we can get that fan spinning. There is a valve, there is a quarter turn valve, actually a needle valve. I'll show you what that is. My hands are oily. Imagine the valve on a faucet on the side of your house to turn water on your water spigot. There's a valve like that up at the pump, which is to limit flow, to adjust your fan speed. It's pretty stiff. You may need to get some pliers to move it, but we'll turn the tractor back on, run the PTO up, and see what happens. So I'm not seeing any fan pressure build up or hearing the fan start. So I think this needle valve might be shut. So I'm going to get some vice grips, try and move that a bit, see if we can get some flow. Alright, I've opened that valve, it was shut. We'll see if that changes how everything's running. So I'm still not getting anything. I'm going to play with the valve a little bit more, probably pull a line again and see what I can figure out. Alright, so I started digging into one of the row units. You can see here the gauge wheel is off. I've taken that off. That was just a bolt that held that arm on. You can see the fresh green grease. It actually took grease, which surprised me. But the reason I took that off, and what I wanted to show you guys, is look at this disc blade. It shouldn't move like that. Let's go on to the other side. Sorry, aiming at the wrong spot. Much less movement, spins pretty smooth. That's how it's supposed to be. I mean, it's a little loose, but it shouldn't be wobbly like that. So I'm pretty sure the mount is under this cap. So I'm gonna pull that off and we'll see what that takes to replace. bearing cap's off. I gotta go grab a socket, pull that off, and I'll try and show you guys what's shot in there, if there's evidence of it. But it was clearly shot. I'll get that disc off so it can be on the list of things to add. All right, I got that disc off. I'll show you guys what that looks like, and then a little bit closer look of the row unit. So this is the bearing here. Let me take my glove off. And you can kind of see how it should spin, but it shouldn't move around like that. So that's why the bearing's shot. The thing to also look for me, to make sure it's not the mounting post that's shot. So this is where it mounts. I'm shaking the whole row unit, so that's a good sign. That means this is fine. Just need a new disc blade. That's easy enough to get. I'll order that. But that's why I'm going through everything, to get a list of how many parts are needed. While I've got this off, I'll show you guys kind of how the seed gets down into the trench. So it's gonna come from that disc via fan down this hose or seed tube. This is what we call the seed tube. The seed will come down and exit at the bottom, shooting into the trench. You can see this white part on here. That's called a seed tab. That keeps the seed, as it hits the trench, from bouncing back out. It rides up above to keep the seed from bouncing out of the trench. But I'm gonna keep going through the rest of these parts. It's gonna be the same thing 5 more times now. So I'm gonna probably end this video here, and I'll get my parts ordered, and you guys will see me when I got new parts to put on. But thanks for coming out, hanging out with Cedar Cove Farm. Hopefully you guys are learning a little bit about this Cyclo as I go through it, as I learn about it. But we'll catch you next time.